Yes.
You got a few more coming?
We
or?
have a few more coming. They're en route, but nonetheless, we know your time is valuable, so we're fine with starting the meeting if it's okay with you.
I'm okay.
We don't have any
waiting-
action
waiting
items, so.
5 minutes or so.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Wait a little bit.
Okay. Mr. Payne, you join it. Which side are you on? Because this is a
where they
game.
put my.
Oh, yeah.
This is a
My
game.
name tag.
You got to choose your alliance.
Yeah.
You know who you with.
Hey,
You
I
with
thought
them?
I thought we were all together
Yeah,
just
yeah.
a couple
Wait,
seconds ago.
Once 6 o'clock starts, then this.
You're talking big community game a couple seconds ago.
I was just talking. We have Laura and
I see two people.
one are walking. Yeah.
Walking in.
Javier just said he's on Monticello and Avon. Okay. So yeah, they'll be here just a second. Hey.
That's what
See,
they were
I
telling me.
just told him. See.
Oh man.
See?
He's gonna just run back and forth when he has to answer.
No,
a
you better sit in the
question.
middle. Hey, Miss Alice. How are you? You all right? You okay? You?
That's okay, something on beat.
Amen. And you're looking great. Before she gets we got you covered. Miss
Yep.
Alice. Bless you.
And I bought.
And you bought one? Well, we got you triple covered then.
And a strip.
And a straw? Oh, okay. Mr. Sanders, how you doing today, sir? Doing well? We truly wonderful and getting better over here. We can't wait to have this meeting, because we just gonna ask for $75 million, so just go ahead and get yourselves ready.
Who are we asking that from?
See? Man. I want it from Mr. Sanders specifically.
Wes, are you doing Duncan booth for West Haven Day?
You should.
I heard I don't have a choice. Our illustrious executive director has signed me up.
At least you got a morning slot.
You're number one, I'm number two.
One.
Mr. Wade is number three?
Yes.
Okay. The rest of the councilors getting a Duncan spot?
I've done it twice.
Oh, third time's a charm.
When is it?
August.
August 3rd. I think I'm in town then.
Okay. Natalie, you joining
I'm
the
checking my
Duncan?
calendar right now. It's
Okay.
ringing a bell, which doesn't.
Brian?
There's a wedding.
Duncan.
It's my birthday.
It's your birthday? All right, no.
The
No, no.
first, it's close, but not quite.
No. All right. You don't have to get in then, I guess. It's a birthday present.
Are you doing one?
Yeah.
Third?
My wife is on the planning committee.
She signed you up.
So yes, you're doing.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a yes.
Yeah.
Well, we have 4 of us here, Mayor Wade. If you'd like to
Okay.
get started, others will be walking in. So we're fine with starting, if that's okay with you.
Okay, so, Madam Clerk, will you call the roll? Is it official meeting, do we call the roll for this? Okay.
The agenda says so.
Okay.
You know how I call Council Payne,
Here.
Council Smith,
Here?
Council Archer,
Here.
Vice Mayor Winston,
Here.
Mayor Wade,
Here.
Ms. Carey?
Commissioner Melody,
Here.
Commissioner Hicks,
Here.
Commissioner Robles,
Here.
Commissioner Washington, here.
So, John, I just kind of wanted to start off that this is something we have been wanting to do for a while, but it's always something that's come up just to kind of get these two boards together. As far as I know, for the 2.5 years since I've been on here, we haven't met as jointly. But I see the purpose of this meeting just for us to get an update on what you all are doing. I always get questions on, when is West Haven going to be redeveloped, or what's going on with South First Street and things like that. And so you can present, and then we can just have a dialogue. So it's not anything that we're going to vote on or anything. We just kind of want to find out what's going on.
We do have a presentation
Okay.
that we sent over, and we did send around the annual report. Which
Yeah.
also has
Thank you, Mr. Sales.
All right, so I'd like to first start by thanking everyone for being here today, City Council, CRHA Board of Commissioners, CRHA staff, city staff. The presentation is broken out into 3 categories. We're currently undergoing a strategic planning session, and so I'm going to provide you all with our 3 goals that we've established. We are undergoing redevelopment, so there's going to be an update on our redevelopment process, and then any strategic initiatives that we have undergoing and some new initiatives that align with you all's housing plan, affordable housing plan. Go to the next slide. So our strategic plan was designed off of 3 pillars: residents first, community building, and inspiring transformation. Next slide. So our first goal is to foster an environment that advances resident stability and well-being. Our second goal is to drive redevelopment and preservation opportunities through community collaboration and partnerships. And our third goal is to equip CRHA with organizational structure that stores a healthy relationship with residents in the the Charlottesville community, I'm sorry. Next slide. You can skip 2. So we're now going into redevelopment. Our redevelopment has been broken up into 2 phases, or multiple phases. Our first phase of redevelopment was Crescent Halls and South First Street Phase 1. So the Crescent Halls development was a senior and disabled development that was built in 1978. In the renovation process, the planning started in 2018. Go to the next slide. Actual construction began on April 2021. We saw significant delays due to COVID. We had a significant water leak within 2 months of starting a project that flooded half of the building. We had to relocate all of the residents in the building. That increased the cost, and so that delayed the project significantly. We also had some issues with contractor capacity after about 2 years of being in a project, and so we ended up having to switch contractors around 75% completion. Next slide. So in May, we began reoccupying the building. We started with the 6th, 7th, and 8th floor. At that point, the residents started moving back in, but we still had significant work on other floors. And this is at the point where things went awry with the previous contractor, and we ended up switching to Breeden Construction, who ended up finishing out the project. Next slide.
Who was your first contractor?
GMA Construction, they're headquartered in Chicago. So the building has received substantial completion, and we're currently in the process of finalizing permanent financing. So we're working with Virginia Housing to get that complete. We have some small projects that were not originally included in our redevelopment, such as a gazebo for residents that will allow them to be able to smoke without being caught in the rain, and a traffic gate that goes along First Street. This traffic gate was requested by residents to close off the speedway that goes from First Street to Second Street, where folks used to cut through. And so that gate should be going up within the next 30 days. The building still serves seniors and persons with disabilities. All of the building has been completely renovated, including community spaces, a renovated clinic, a new mail room, resident-controlled heating and cooling systems, 2 tub rooms that are available for residents because the bathrooms were converted to walk-in showers. And so we do have some tub rooms that are available for reservations that the residents can reserve. We've also added additional handicap parking spaces that are closer to the building and improved accessibility in all the apartments. Solar panels on the roof, which were donated by the Dave Matthews Band, and refurbished elevator systems. Next slide. The building still consists of 105 units, but we've changed the subsidy mix of the building The building used to be 100% public housing. Now it's 53 public housing units and 52 project-based voucher units. The project was funded through low-income housing tax credit, the Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund, which is our private donor, the City of Charlottesville, and loan financing. The city's contribution was $1.8 million for a total development cost of approximately $19 million.
Mr. Sales, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure I clarify for the members of council, not to disrespect you in any capacity, but do you all understand the difference between public housing units and project-based voucher units? Or would you like for Mr. Sales to
Yeah, if you
briefly
could explain that. just
explain that?
just
Yes,
for-
I can do that. So a project-based voucher unit is a regular HCV voucher, but it's place-based, so it's specific to that unit. So any resident that moves into that unit will get the assistance. So instead of like a regular voucher where you can take it to whatever home you would like, this voucher stays with that home, and any family that goes into that home within the next 20 years receives that assistance. And we have the ability to continue renewing that contract. And so it allows this project to actually pay for the financing. So on average, a public housing unit, including subsidy and rent, gets about $600 a month in rent. That's subsidy and the tenant rent. And that covers operation, utility bills, property taxes, covers everything. Or it's supposed to cover everything. But with this new form, with the voucher, we'll be able to charge closer to market rents, and the federal government will pay the difference of what the tenant is supposed to pay and the actual market rate rent. So like one bedroom is now $1,500 instead of $600 is what we're getting for that. And that will allow us to pay off the debt, the loans that are on the property.
Does that make sense to everyone? We good?
Yeah, I guess the only question I've had about, I've been aware of the push to getting more voucher as opposed to public housing units.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you not simply say, let's make them all voucher units?
Because there's some protections that are in the public housing units that you don't have in the regular voucher units. So like the right to organize, the right to a grievance process. And so those things aren't baked in the voucher program because the voucher program is typically more market rate. And so it goes on the traditional market, which those things aren't common.
So I didn't remember whether the 53 was the public housing, the 53 public housing, 52 voucher. Does that mix, I mean, it seems convenient that you've got slightly more than 50% as public housing. Is that a marker of some sort within the federal funding scheme or anything?
No, it's only a marker. So each project is going to be different. And so we determine how that mix works. And you're going to see in 6th Street, we've changed it based upon getting finances back. So the way it works is based upon what it cost us, as drop down plain as I can get. When you change the numbers, it does even better, yes. But what we're looking at is what is the minimum we have to do in order to make this project work financially, provide the services that our residents would like, while also being able to protect the actual physical units that there's baked in protections from the federal government around the ACC units. And we're looking at ways where the units we didn't bring back. So there's 52 Faircloth units that are sitting dormant. We're looking at ways where we can implement those, so then it brings a net positive increase in subsidized units, which we're already doing, you'll see as we go through, because we're bringing on more voucher units from our regular pool.
Thank you, Mr. Sales.
No problem. Thanks a lot. So this is the second project of our Phase 1 projects, and this is South First Street, Phase 1. This project is a 62-unit development in between 3 apartment buildings. It originally began planning in 2018 with residents. Residents were not as involved because this was supposed to be a project that allowed CRHA to start relocating to start Crescent Halls. As this development went through the process, it was determined that that was not the best approach for renovating Crescent Halls. And so this became a standalone development for the relocation of South First Street Phase 2 project. This was originally a vacant field and was used for baseball, playground, and basketball in the garden. There was a community garden there as well. This construction began in February of 2021, And there is a video, but we're not going to play it, but it's Joy Johnson and some other folks, Sally Hudson and Nakia Walker, actually doing the groundbreaking. Next slide. This project also experienced COVID delays because it was slated to begin in 2020, which was when COVID went rampant. It experienced significant increases. None of these two projects required us to come back to the city. We did go back to other donors and to other government sources to get additional funding to close the gaps. But we got the projects completed, and this development is fully occupied. The third building came online in July 2023. It features a community center, fitness room, computer lab, property manager office, and both developments have free Wi-Fi for the next 30 years. Next slide. The rents are subsidized at this property with 13 public housing units, 24 project-based voucher units, and 25 non-subsidized units that are primarily filled with vouchers because there's not enough housing units available. And so when these tax credit properties come online, they fill up quickly with vouchers. This project was also funded through low-income housing tax credit, the Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund, the City of Charlottesville, and loans from Virginia Housing. The city's contribution was $1.175 million for a total development cost of $19.4 million. Next slide. Are there any?
Can I add something really quickly
Yes.
to that one? I think, so when you all, just for council's clarification, when people ask to a certain extent, like, what's the relationship or how does council and the resources in which you allocate directly impact the housing authority? I don't know if there's a greater project than South First Street. This is one in which we allocated the funds shortly after everything transpired in 2017, well, before everything transpired in 2017 in that budget. And even with the COVID delays, in less than 7 years, we see a leased up project with individuals from the community living in a very, very nice apartment complex, quote unquote, and with several amenities and individuals truly enjoying where they live. And I think, again, that's like the direct impact from you all providing resources. And when you all not only match our funds, but we have the forward thinking of us all committing to housing, these are the benefits and this is what happens. And then essentially our citizens and our residents, because holistically they're all of our residents. I mean, they may be under the auspice of CRHA, but they live in the city of Charlottesville. Our residents are the benefactors. So when we're, again, thinking about what we can do moving forward, just look no further than South First Street and how nice it is in the work in which the Housing Authority staff is doing as a model for what we're looking to do moving forward. Would that be accurate, Mr. Stiles?
Yes. And I'll just add that the South First Street Phase 2 project did receive Zero Energy Ready certification. We went for Passive House. We did not get it for this project, but we will be aiming for it for future projects.
Question for you. This is an impressive amount of work. How are you getting all of this done? In terms of, do you have people that you've hired as project managers? Is your architecture firm doing a lot of that work for you? Are you doing it yourself?
We have a huge team, not a CRHA employee team, but we have a huge team of, our development partner has brought a lot of resources to the table. Riverbend AHG has assisted us with project management. They've assisted us. VCDC, Virginia Community Development Corporation, has assisted with the tax syndication, finding other funding sources like the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta, DHCD. So we have a lot of different hands at the table. And that's for the first few projects. That assistance will slowly trickle away as we go further down the line, and CRHA is building that capacity internally with the assistance of AHG.
AHG.
The Affordable Housing Group, which is Riverbend
Okay.
and the other partners.
And do you pay them a fee?
No, it's all pro bono. They
Really?
allow us to keep the developer fee, which we put a portion of it back into the project to make sure it's sustainable. And then we use the remainder, which these projects will be the first two projects to receive a developer fee. We'll use that to invest in the staff we need to continue these projects.
Okay, thank you.
and which is how the partnership was designed in the first place.
Mr. Sales, I'm just curious, I'm noticing as we look through these summaries that you've given us, that the city investment in South First Street amounts to roughly 1/16 of the total development cost. And then the percentage, the amount of the city participation goes up. The Crescent Halls is about 1/10, South First Street is 2/13 roughly, and 1/10, 1/9. What's the distinguishing characteristic? Why is one of them less city money, or perhaps a way to put it, more outside money? What's happening when the ones have more outside money?
It's all about what's the need and what's the gap. And so on some projects, there are additional resources that are available. So there's a lot of green money out right now. And so we're applying for a lot of green retrofit funds to close gaps, but we don't plan on that money always being available. And so we're trying to give you numbers now to project for construction that starts 3, 4, 5 years on the road. And for like West Haven, we're talking about three different phases between an 8 and 10 year total gap. And so they're very rough numbers. And there's been a huge cost in construction increase. And so that's going to be part of the increase that you're seeing. Just on South First Street alone, there was a 40% increase on the Phase 2 project, which is why we had to go back and do a whole lot of redesigning. Thanks to James Freeze and his team for working with us on that, because it took an entire redesign of the actual site plan. And James Freeze and his team helped at the very last minute to get that done and get it approved.
I fully appreciate there are a lot of uncertainties anytime you're talking about a project of any one of these magnitudes. I was just curious whether there was something in particular that you were able to harness in the South First Street Phase 1 that maybe you're hoping to get for the later on projects, but you haven't quite got yet? Or?
No, that project is probably going to be one of the cheaper of the projects. It was priced a little bit before COVID. We were able to keep the contractor locked in a little bit. We had more, or the contract had less leeway. As we write contracts now, that is not the case, because they have been burned. The contractors have been burned on COVID, and so they've learned their lesson to give themselves some breathing room with inflation and cost changes. And so we're now seeing that and we're projecting that out in our costs.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next slide. So our second phase of projects is South First Street Phase 2, which the demolition started yesterday. The first building was knocked down, which was 912. You can go to the next slide. This is the second building. Brandon updated these photos today. So now they're working on the 914 building. Next slide. This is the overall site plan of what South First Street will look like in totality. To the left side of the screen, you'll see South First Street Phase 1, which are the white buildings. You have a little parking lot in between. Maybe I should go up here and show them, sorry. South First Street Phase 1 is here. Phase 2 is here. This is Slade Avenue. Our next slide. So South First Street Phase 2 had a in-depth resident planning. They met every Sunday to hash out the details on what South First Street Phase 2 looked like. And at the end of the agreement, they agreed to increase the density from 58 units to 113 units. It's a mixture of townhomes and small apartment buildings, a community center, and a CRHA office building that's mixed into the apartment building that's at the corner of Elliott Avenue. Next slide. So the full build out of South First Street of all phases will go from 58 units to 175 units. Of that, 150 of those units are deeply affordable, which means families at 0 to 30% AMI could afford to live in those units with the subsidy that's attached to the units. Next slide. Actually, could we go back one slide? I'm sorry. And this project is 100. The second phase of the project is all of them are project-based voucher units. And as I was explaining earlier with us determining which mix to use, once we penciled out what the previous mix was, which was 38 public housing units, it didn't pencil out. We could not make the project work with the debt needed to fund the project. And so we removed all public housing units and converted them all to project-based voucher to make the debt mix work for this project.
Phase one,
In phase two.
phase two, okay.
Yes, so all 113 are project-based vouchers. But you'll still be able to serve families from 0 to 30% AMI. So you'll still have the extremely low-income families being able to be served in this building.
So, John, the additional 120 units or so, are they going to be drawn from this people in the city's waiting list?
Correct.
Or
So all of the project-based voucher units we use draw from the public housing wait list. As we begin the redevelopment process, we knew we were taking off public housing units from the pool in order to do redevelopment. And so at Crescent Hall is an example. We had 105 units, we removed 52. We wanted to make sure that the families that were still on that Crescent Hall's wait list still had 105 chances to get into those units instead of now only 53 chances. So we're using the public housing wait list to serve those families as well, to ensure that the families still get housed.
How flexible is changing that mix? Like, are you locked into a certain ratio for a certain amount of time, or you can?
No, you can change it at any time as long as you can financially afford to pay the debt. And so what's going to lock you in or give you the flexibility is determining what the debt is and what the property can afford to pay.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
No problem.
But you are, not that it would be an issue in the future, the Faircloth Amendment gives us a maximum amount of public housing units.
Yes,
that
so we
couldn't go above.
we can't go over 376 public housing units. So if we wanted to convert, we could convert all the units back at Crescent Halls and convert 58 at the South First Street project if at some point we could afford to pay the debt and make those conversions. But you couldn't do any more than the 58 at South First Street because you'll be going past your Faircloth limit.
Could
which-
you explain the Faircloth Amendment?
So the Faircloth Amendment was a law passed to keep housing authorities from growing, adding additional public housing units to the market. And so each housing authority was capped at the number that they had at that time, and ours is 376. So we can't go above 376 public housing units. But you can have other units that are not public housing, such as project-based vouchers and non-subsidized units. They just can't have the ACC attached to them.
And in your context, non-subsidized unit is pretty much always someone with a voucher moves
And-
into that unit.
In our case, 98% of that is likely. In the ones that aren't likely, our units are still capped at no more than 60% AMI.
And so to clarify, the unit itself is non-subsidized, but it accepts a voucher, which is
Correct.
essentially a subsidy from a different.
Yes, so there's no subsidy tied to the unit, but a family can come in with subsidy and still qualify for the
Great,
unit.
okay, thanks.
Next slide. So the second project of this phase is Sixth Street Phase 1, and we're currently in the HUD and city approval process. Next slide. So this is Building A, which is what we've been calling it, of the Sixth Street development. It's a 4-story mixed-use building. It has a UVA clinic. We've signed an agreement with UVA to have a clinic on the first floor. We have space for a farmer's market of sort, resident service space, and ample community space for residents. This development is estimated to cost $30 million. It's funded through low-income housing tax credit, the Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund, the City of Charlottesville, and loan financing. City contribution is $3 million. The rent subsidy mix is 6 public housing units and 41 project-based voucher units. And we are currently in the process of waiting for mixed finance approval from HUD. We're estimating construction to begin in the winter of 2024 and completion by the end of 2026. This is a project where we also went back and forth on the subsidy mix. At one point, interest rates were so high we could not bring back any public housing units because of the debt service. Interest rates have gone down. Virginia Housing has been willing to work with us because they want us to bring back public housing units. It's part of their mission, and so they've given us a reduced interest rate in order to get us to bring back 6 public housing units. And so We're currently going back in the process to get HUD approvals. We did have HUD approvals to knock down all of the public housing, knock down the public housing units and rebuild the 47 units as project-based vouchers. But our mission is to bring back public housing, and so we are taking the time to make the needed changes to get HUD to approve the mixed finance application, while it's also going through the final city approval process.
So to start construction or destruction, I guess, at the end of 2024?
Yes.
Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, to start construction by the end of 2024. We've already emptied out, it's 6 apartment units on that row. We've emptied out 4 already because we were anticipating a start in July until we made the decision to switch the subsidy mix of the property.
And then you're thinking it's to take 2 years for the
2
process?
years, correct. Yep, most of our projects are estimated between 18 months and 2 years.
Okay.
All right, next slide. The building is made up of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. The ground floor includes a computer lab, medical clinic. Outdoor space includes a basketball court and playground. Next slide. And this building is going to be at the corner of Monticello and 6th Street. So it's going to be facing Kendallwood. Next slide. The third phase of our redevelopment projects, and we're currently in the planning stages. The rezoning threw a curveball for 6th Street, and so we had to go back and make some changes to get closer to what the city's plan is for that area. We still have some changes that we're going to request, some amendments to make the project work, but we're a lot closer than we were when the zoning changed. Next slide, sorry. So the full build-out, anticipated full build-out for this site is going to go from 25 units to 95 units. The units will be deeply affordable at 30% AMI and lower. We are looking at homeownership opportunities on this site between 3 to 6. So the conversation is around, will they be double stacked units or are they going to be single townhouse units? And so they can be 2-over-2s or single townhouse units. So it's either going to be 3 or 6, but the final determination has not been made on that yet. But there's some new money available for homeownership around public housing, and so we are looking to take advantage of that.
So, John, several of these, of course, you talk about the increase in the number of units. Would that have happened with or without the new zoning ordinance that went into effect in February?
Yes, I do think so. The residents have really showed a lot of courage and willingness to go above what the norm is. Normally, folks have that the NIMBYism, not in my backyard. They're worried about losing green space, the sense of community. But like watching the South First Street residents work and go from, hey, we just want to bring back what we have, to, okay, maybe we'll do a little bit more, to they're almost tripling what was already there. And that only brings more families and more opportunities for folks to get housed that have been on wait lists for years. And so I do think these projects would have gone through, but what you all did was great work, because it's going to see other projects that would not have gone through get bigger and produce more affordable units or more opportunities.
So where is the nearest just plain old playground for these kids?
So we're building playgrounds, smaller playgrounds at all of our sites. So in South First Street Phase 1, there's a playground directly behind the building. At South First Street Phase 1, there's already a playground in between the 1050 and 1052 building. We're building a larger playground in Phase 2 for that community. And as you will see as we go through here, CRHA and our partners have really invested in amenity space and playgrounds, not only at these sites, but also at the other sites. And we're working with our development partner for the residents to design their own playground. Our development partner has worked previously with the organization that designs playgrounds with the community, so the community can actually pick what components make up that playground, and it's a one-off. That's the only playground you'll see ever like that. And so that is something that we are deeply committed to, and all the residents make sure we know that that's what they want to see when we have the resident engagement meetings.
And will
I would
there
only
be-
add though, in addition to the playgrounds, if you see some of our clubhouse space, quote unquote, or like kind of the spaces that we have for the residents, they're top notch. They're top tier in every way imaginable, because we've also noticed from a lot of the young people, playing on the playground is one thing, but playing games and video games of that nature is also something that they really enjoy to do. So we have to provide a multitude of spatial options for not only the young persons in the community, but their parents as well, because we have a very thriving population of a multitude of different ethnicities. So fitting in different ways for us to be able to address the needs of our residents is really important, which I think Mr. Sells and his staff, as well as the Housing Authority Board as a whole, we've been trying to address those needs in a wide variety of different ways. But we also know that these things are expensive. So in some regard, I think we have to be very creative in the way in which we go about covering the cost for some of these items, and we're looking forward to having further discussions about how we continue to build on the models in which we currently have. Would that be accurate,
Yes,
Mr.
it would.
Sims?
Well, I mean, let me mention something that sort of my overall concern as I'm looking at this. And it's not a concern about any particular project, but rather the entire whole scheme between losing the soccer field at what's now Kindlewood,
Mm-hmm.
between losing the open space at the corner of Sixth and Monticello,
Mhm.
another open space gone. First Street, that open space is gone. I remember back, in the 1980s, Drury Brown basically single-handedly stopped a proposal that would have caused the development of the area, now the Venable Field,
Mhm.
where the football game is.
Where the
played-
Turkey Bowl is.
there-
Mhm.
Played every year.
Mm-hmm.
When he basically said there was a proposal to have, there was gonna be some housing and there was gonna be a playground that was, built up.
Right.
Not just a field.
Right.
And he basically said, where are kids gonna just play ball?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering where they might play basketball is one thing, where they would kick a soccer ball or throw a football or something like that. I'm just wondering, because I'm seeing all of the large enough spaces to do that getting used for housing, which is great on the one hand, but the kids in the area lose something when that happens.
Yeah, I think it's a very unique and very complicated issue, to say the least. I mean, on one hand, we know the desperate need for housing, as well as affordable housing within our community. I don't think that we're saying, and Mr. Sells, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that we're saying one has to be sacrificed for the other, but we are having to be very creative in the way in which we go about addressing that issue. To answer your question in terms of, just to use the example of soccer, we would make the case that, or excuse me, I would make the case as one individual, not as the chair of the Housing Authority Board. There still is a very large soccer field at Townsville Park, in which we see a multitude of kids using for soccer, softball, 7-on-7 football, flag football, and other uses. I think there are still spaces and opportunities for kids to play within our community, but from our perspective, we have to try to address two things. And one, the initial priority is trying to ensure we have affordable housing units. So how we do that is utilizing the space as best we can, and then also ensuring that the space is equitable for all of our residents. And that's where the playing fields and the amenities, the other amenities that we provide, all come into play. Would that be accurate?
Yes, it is. And I will say, green space is something that our development partner made sure that that's something we talked about.
And it's maintained.
Yes, and is maintained. Energy efficiency is really important to our development partners, which is why they've donated the solar array system at Crescent Halls, because the project would not have generated enough for a PPA agreement, and so they actually donated the system. And so, as you'll see in South First Street Phase 2, we have a site plan. Can you go to the next slide? And maybe we'll go 2 more slides, I'm sorry. As you see, we have a decent amount of green space still, and so up on the right-hand side of the screen, which is where Building A is, there's green space to the right side, butting up towards the X property, And we also left ample green space in front of Building B, which is on the far left-hand side, which is currently where the basketball court is, going to the Ix, to doing that side lot. I forgot the name of the street. But green space was definitely something that the residents wanted to make sure that we emphasize a need for, and also a development partner. Next slide. I'm sorry, can you go back one? I didn't talk about this project. So this project is a mixture of townhouse units, for sale and rental units, and also an apartment building that will have 28 units. Will not have an elevator, be a garden style apartment similar to what we built at South First Street Phase 1. We have not determined a unit mix for subsidy, but as we go through pricing and determine what our final numbers are, we'll be able to determine what the subsidy mix will be for the project. All right, next slide. West Haven, our largest project, and probably the most political. West Haven was developed during urban renewal. And so it has a lot of history, and we want to make sure as we are redeveloping this project that we are protecting that history and making sure that it can be told to the generations that will live at the property going forward in the future as we redevelop. Next slide, please. And so, like I mentioned, this is was designed after the destruction of Vinegar Hill. We've been planning with residents since September 2022. We've hired our architect, which is Arnold Design Studio, and he has a team working with him, Brick and Story for engagement. And we're currently in the process of identifying a firm to help us tell this story and ensure that the history is still available for folks in the future, because we've found a lot of documents really from the beginning in the creation of West Haven, photos of properties that were purchased in order to make West Haven happen, and other properties that were purchased to move families from Vinegar Hill. And so we want to make sure that history is protected and available. We are estimating and anticipating that this project for a complete build out is going to be around $100 to $150 million. We're anticipating building between 252 and 350 units. We anticipate the funding sources will likely be the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, City of Charlottesville, our development partners, Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund, and other funding sources and opportunities. We're currently working and talking about doing some due diligence work around a Choice Neighborhood Initiative, which could potentially provide between $25 and $50 million for this development. And so we have not pulled the trigger on it yet, but we are currently looking to see what are the pros and cons for moving forward with that application. If we did move forward with the application, it would not be until 2026, because you have to receive your first phase of funding in order to trigger access to the Choice Neighborhood funding.
Even the planning grant?
We are not going to go forward with the planning grant because it's a required 3-year set after you're awarded. So we wait a year to get the award, then we have the plan for 3 years. So it puts us at 4 years before we can even apply for the implementation. We've worked with a consultant to design the planning process that is required for Choice Neighborhood, and we'll fund that planning process exactly like Choice Neighborhood is required to be ready for the implementation grant. So you don't have to receive one to get the other, but it's easier if you receive one to get the other, but there's a requirement that you sit out for 3 years.
Okay.
All right, next slide. And so we talked a lot about redevelopment, and most folks, when they think redevelopment, think tear down and rebuild. But we want to make sure, and Housing Authority approved when they first started redevelopment planning in 2018, to design a parallel track process, which ensures that the non-redeveloped sites, like Mickey, Madison, and Riverside, receive some type of modernization. And so we have, since 2021, we have tied all of our capital funds, which are the funds that we receive from HUD to maintain public housing. We've tied all those funds to a majority of those funds to the parallel track. And so if you go to your next slide, you'll see some before and after. So we started with window replacement, siding replacement, and roof replacements. So all the public housing sites had the metal roofs, and you could easily tell which units on the street were public housing, because they had the metal roofs, the stucco siding, the ugly window units, and the really hideous metal doors. And so we're currently in the process of addressing all of those issues. The windows have been replaced, the siding has been replaced, the roofs have been replaced, and we're currently under contract to upgrade the HVAC and electrical systems. So the units have never had air conditioning, central air. And so they've all been required to use the window units that are inefficient, and they cause other issues during re-inspection. So blocked egress, because you have a huge window unit in it, and so you can't use that window for egress if there was an emergency. So we received a lot of blocked egress. The window screens are missing because you can't have the window screen in, and the AC unit, and so we've been dinged for that as well. And so we're working to get the HVAC installed. They're under contract. We're working with Dominion for the electrical upgrade, which is going to be required before we can actually do the HVAC. Next slide. The city has funded some capital fund projects, which is the HVAC. We received $187,000 for that project. The total for that project is a little over $2 million. What we have captured here is our development partner is really big on playgrounds and green spaces. And so they actually funded the complete renovation of Mickey, Madison's, Riverside's parks, playgrounds, and basketball courts, to some over $1 million for the 3 properties. And that is all I have for that slide. Next slide. Chair, question.
Just in case anybody's not familiar, could you just go over where the locations, all the different
Yes.
locations where parallel track is current?
So Mickey Drive, we have 23 units over on Mickey Drive. We have 18 units at Riverside Avenue, and we have 16 units at Madison Avenue.
How many on Riverside?
Riverside, 16 at Riverside, 18 at Madison, I'm sorry. Next slide. This is about the HVAC. We're also working with residents. We actually just placed an order for kitchen appliance replacements. We're working with the residents to identify entry doors and storm doors that they would like to see installed. And so those projects will also be underway this year for Mickey, Madison, and Riverside.
So for the bathrooms, I'm trying to remember when we got a presentation from Lauren on the different things we're funding with kitchen renovations. I know we're not doing gas hookups or anything like that, but I thought it was funding for, to help with purchase of appliances or something. I can't remember. Water heaters, yeah.
We'll be replacing water heaters in a couple of years. We'll come back.
Okay.
We do have some additional parallel track projects planned, new flooring, interior upgrades from the kitchens and bathrooms. We're estimating that that these projects are going to take another 6 years till we get to fully complete. We're only averaging about $1 million, $1.3 million a year from HUD for these projects. The projects themselves are averaging about $2 million. And so it's a lot of pooling of funds to actually get a project complete. So we're using multiple different years to actually complete a project. And so it's taking a lot longer as we continue. The funding we receive from HUD will shrink because we're taking off public housing units. And that's how they determine how much funding you receive based upon the total number of public housing units. Plus, they also look at the age of the unit. So you bring a new unit on at South First Street, it's going to receive a totally different allocation than a unit at West Haven that's been there since 1963. And so our capital fund will continue to diminish, and so we'll have to continue looking for outside resources if we want to continue completing projects at the pace we're currently completing them. Next slide. So these are some of the initiatives we currently have in progress. The public housing modernization, and these initiatives align with you all's affordable housing plan. And so CRHA has developed a parallel track modernization process with the utilization of HUD-provided capital funds. Funds are obligated yearly and pooled to complete large projects. The city has provided $187,500 to modernize public housing, and that's through HVAC and electrical. CRHA would like an annual commitment of $375,000 per year for the next 5 years from the city for public housing modernization. You don't have to give me an answer now, but if you could stew on that, that would be great. CRHA is strategically deploying project-based vouchers to increase the number of deeply affordable units available in the city of Charlottesville. The deployment of project-based vouchers allows CRHA to assist more families at 0 to 30% AMI. The units are guaranteed assistance for 20 years with the ability to renew the assistance contract after initial term and to continue at each 20 years. Did you have something? Any comments or questions so far before I go to the next slide? Next slide. So these are two new initiatives that are also in your affordable housing plan. The conversion of HCV vouchers to homeownership assistance. CRHA has committed already in its 5-year plan to make up to 5 HCV vouchers available for conversion to homeownership assistance. The city has allocated funding for down payment assistance to this program through the HOME program. The opportunity allows families to use their assistance to make mortgage payments while we make payments to the family to assist them with the mortgage and upkeep of the home. We are actively working to identify lenders for this program. It's new to the city of Charlottesville. We have not done it before, but other housing authorities have done it, and where I came from, we were implementing it, and families have gone through the program and have become homeowners. And so we've committed to making the opportunities available because the voucher program is one of the greatest homeownership assistance programs there are. There are payments that are provided to the family to maintain the property. There are payments made to the mortgage company to cover the mortgage. And so it really keeps the family in a safe, healthy home that they own. Are there any questions on that?
Has the lender been identified to support this?
No, but we have been talking to a couple of different lenders that support it and do it in other localities, but they don't have a base here. But we're working on that.
So if we end up saying, let's say we're gonna make 5 housing choice vouchers available for conversion to home ownership,
Mhm.
roughly how much is that, are those 5 housing choice vouchers?
How much are, so we don't have a dollar amount, but what's determined on the home ownership price is based upon the market rate for a home ownership unit based upon the bedroom size. And so HUD is willing to pay and will pay based upon what we commit. So if TC cuts a check for $2,000 for a family for their mortgage payment, HUD will then see that when we do our report every month, that TC cut a check for $2,000. That was an increase, and so we'll get that back, and they'll increase our allocation. That's how the program works. There are not a whole lot, and there's a cap on how many vouchers you can convert to home ownership. And so we haven't converted any, but 5 is the commitment that we're offering to make available, up to 5 per year.
Is there a greater financial cost to the city to making them home ownership assistance instead of HCV?
There's no cost to the city. This is all federal money.
Okay.
And you said 5 per year.
Up to 5 per year.
And are those of the units we just talked about, or just out there in the world, whatever?
No,
is
these
available?
are units that are out there in the world. So if Habitat created a unit and someone had a voucher and they would like to purchase it, they can use their voucher. We just have to work with the lender. The program, the tricky part of the program is the lender has to be able to accept 2 payments, one from the individual living in the home and one from CRHA. And that's where the trickiness comes to the program. That's, I know Dollar Bank has started to finance this, but they're not here. And so they were in my previous locality and they picked up the program. And so it's finding the right lender for this unique model. But there are lenders out there and other housing authorities are doing it. Next slide.
I think we only have a couple more, right?
This is the last one, and then I think Q&A, maybe. So this is one where we really need a lot of help from the city. Give a little bit of background. The Housing Choice Voucher Program has a inspection standard that used to be called the Housing Quality Standard, HQS. After a lot of back and forth, HUD has decided to change that standard to have a universal standard for inspections called Inspire. Housing authorities were already using a model very close, and so our inspections are a lot more stringent than HQS inspections, and it was a lot easier to pass HQS inspection. So I'll give you an example, like if someone had carpet and the carpet had a rip, the property manager could just remove the carpet and leave the plywood down as floor, and it would be acceptable in HQS standards. That would not be acceptable in public housing. We would have been dinged on it and had a lot of violations. HUD sees that as an issue, and so now they've brought these standards to the exact same standards, which landlords are going to have some issues with because it's going to require them to make strategic investments in their property because they have to bring their property up to the current codes. HUD has pushed it back again, the implementation of this. It was supposed to start October 1. We had our first meeting with landlords in conjunction with the County Office of Housing a couple weeks ago here at City Space. We plan to have 2 meetings a year to talk about changes and things such as this and what resources are available. But we are suggesting that the city look into the development of a rental rehab program. I think this is going to be essential in order to keep units that are currently voucher eligible and using vouchers available still for voucher programs because they're going to need a lot of rehab in order to pass inspections. Some units have a hard time passing the HUS inspection now. There are going to be a lot more that have that issue with the new Inspire standards. HUD has pushed it back another year for implementation because landlords have pushed back about the investments that they'll have to make and not having resources to pool to make those investments. And so I'm asking that we start talking about what programs the city could partner with us around or other agencies around, but focus it on the voucher landlords because we're going to be at risk of losing a lot of them if we don't have a program that they can tap into.
So would it be something like if we do that, they would have to say that they're gonna keep it as a rental for X amount of if the city or the housing authority
Yeah.
pour some money into it type of thing?
So you could gear it different ways. The one we did, we had a forgivable loan that was there for 10 to 15 years, where if the house was sold, we would call the money back. The house had to continue being eligible for a low-income family during that time period. At the end of that time period, the money was then forgiven. We used the 10 to 15 years because normally the work that we did, the useful life of it, was done after 10 to 15 years. So then it gets them in the cycle of coming back to get more rehab work done. And the ones who end up selling early, it brings the money back in to be recycled.
Good. So John, this is not directly related to this, but it's not uncommon for me to 4 to 6 times a week will get an email from a resident that their place that they're in, it's going out of affordable units, and but they have a voucher, and they go look, and they tell me that the place that I've looked, I don't think it is going to pass inspection type of thing. And so I know it's not a housing authority unit, but I think it's, someone who takes vouchers. So if someone has a voucher and they go to a place that's a private place, do you all inspect it, or someone inspects it and say it has to meet these?
So we inspect all the units that are not owned by CRHA. So we now do Dogwood, South First Street, Crescent Halls. We are now a landlord through the voucher program. So we are not allowed to inspect our own units. So we have a relationship with Albemarle County Office of Housing where they do all of our inspections for our personal units that we own or manage. But then we inspect all the units for our program participants that are not living in one of our units.
And then a little connected to it, the current wait list is several thousand people, correct?
Yeah, the current HCV wait list is over 1,900. The current public housing wait list is well over 2,000.
Are they closed or are they still open?
The public housing wait list is still open. The HCV wait list has been closed, and we got those 1,900 families in less than a week.
And for those housing choice voucher wait list, just like ballpark sense of how many people who have a voucher who find housing, how many of them are finding housing through a nonprofit or affordable housing provider or a low-income housing tax credit development versus purely private landlord?
Yeah, roughly 75% of our units are assigned to a unit that's already required to be affordable,
So only 25% is
roughly.
basically non-subsidized. And what's the biggest barrier encountered for someone who has a voucher, they still can't find a unit to live in even though they got the voucher?
Yeah, so we have about a 60% success rate, so 40% of our families are unable to lease up. The barriers typically include previous rental history, criminal history, and unfortunately, folks are still going after the 3 times the rent. CRHA saw those barriers, and we've removed all those barriers for Dogwood. And so when a Dogwood family comes with a voucher, we're not running their credit history or their rental history, because we know that voucher is there to subsidize that rent. And so we've released and removed those barriers to make sure families can get housed. But we're encouraging other landlords to do the same.
Right. And final piece related to it, so someone could have a voucher, find a unit, they end up getting not accepted for credit, or they can't match the other things. But the unit that they could even pair with the voucher has to be a certain rent level or
Yep.
below, correct?
Yep, we have a payment standard, and folks often get confused, and landlords see that CRHA posted new payment standards, and they're like, oh, great, we can go jack up the rents. And what they don't realize is that in that payment standard includes the utilities. And so that payment standard is the rent plus utilities, the total cost for that unit. And so when they do jack it up to that max rent, it makes a lot of families ineligible for that unit, or makes them rent burden where they're gonna pay more than 30% of their income towards rent.
Right, but there's a lot of units where someone with a voucher, even in theory, they can't access those
Yep.
units just because the
rent's
asking
so
price is too high.
Yeah.
And then just ballpark is, let's say you're like a family who got a voucher, you've got kids, you're looking for a 3-bedroom unit. What would be that maximum rent?
3-bedroom max, I believe it's 2,200, and that's including utilities. And so they're really looking at a unit that's about 1,900 to be on the safe spot, because you're probably thinking about $300 in utilities.
So ballpark, any 3-bedroom units with a rent above $1,900 a month is out of the universe for housing choice vouchers.
9 times out of 10, unless they're going above the 30% income, where
Yeah.
they're being rent burdened.
I just think that's really important context.
And I will say our payment standards have gone up, but they're way below the average. So 5-bedroom payment standard, I believe, is 2,800. You'll be lucky to find one at 3,500. And so there are issues with the payment standard, but that's not something we can adjust. What we have to do is be able to make more units available that are naturally or deeply affordable. And then I think we need to do something with holding the units that you all are getting that are proffered, holding them at a reasonable rate, because oftentimes we're seeing the tax credit folks having just as high rents as the non-tax credit properties, which only reduces the number of vouchers we can actually put on the street. Because if you have more money going to 10 vouchers, you have less that you can lease up. Our voucher capacity, it's a little over 685, but we only have maybe 620 actually in that pool, because the vouchers cost more than what the average is.
Thank you.
So I think that concludes the presentation.
No, I got one more, and then I'll be done. I'm sorry. I promise. All right, one more. All right, this is an important one. Collaboration around safety. We're seeing a lot of safety issues at our sites, specifically South First Street and West Haven. And so we're interested in what partnerships we can bring with the police department and other organizations with the city to improve that safety, not only around community policing, but also the mental health issues we're having in the sites, and also some relief opportunities to get the youth out of the community and trying new things and into new programs. We're also working on, we're collaborating with Department of Community Solutions to engage around the CRHA program and the referral process for participating agencies. Additional funding will be needed to increase the families that are able to be served in this program, because we're only serving currently homeless and families that are in the self-sufficiency program. So that is the last slide besides Q&A, and I'm done. Thank you, guys.
So you talked about this,
Well, hold on,
before.
Mr. Wade, we got to give our executive director
Yeah.
a rep. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
We clap for ours around here. Good job, Mr. Sales.
So you talked about, alternatives and options for the youth, particularly the teens, the 13 to 18, and, because they usually don't do that. They do basketball, but they usually don't kind of play in the playground. And I just saw actually where the Y is opening up a, kind of teen space, kind of what you had talked about, whereas they may not go to the Y, but I like as many options as possible. Some might go, if you have something that would be great. So, but anyway, we've been kind of asking questions as going along, but if there may be others questions that you have.
Our colleagues on the commission has some things they want to add. Dr. Goldblatt had a couple things that she wanted to add.
Yeah, I don't know, if people have questions, I want to make sure that there's time for that. I mean, yeah.
I think first of all, it's very impressive the amount of work you guys are getting done, and the imagination and creativity you're bringing to it, which I think is essential. This West Haven project, I think, is going to be an order of magnitude more involved, more challenging, more difficult. Just hoping you've got the team that you need to pull that off, and I don't know if there's any support the city could provide from a project management perspective, or just peer review, or whatever, but what was the schedule for that again, for West Haven?
So we plan on submitting our first tax credit application in March of 2026, with construction to start in 2027.
Okay, so we have a little bit of time.
Yeah, we have a little bit of time, and we've been working, like, we've had James Friesen, when he was director of NDS, he came and talked with the resident planners about zoning and density and land use, and when we were going through the curriculum that was developed by UVA, School of Architect. And so we had the city along, we brought in police department, schools, fire department, I think Parks and Rec, when we were talking about the Choice Neighborhood Initiative, because it touches everything. It's not only just housing, but it's the people, it's businesses.
It's a holistic approach.
Yes, it's a holistic approach to redevelopment of neighborhoods.
Okay.
I know your meeting, I was in a small coffee shop. It was 7:30 in the morning. You huddle with your team.
Yes.
So you're everywhere, so I know you're meeting, so.
One question I've got, I guess, is whether, as you look at what's in store for West Haven, is there any thought that you would want to use some portion of the land there for some kind of mixed-use thing that would be some income-generating property for y'all's benefit to help deal with some of these budget shortfalls?
So the Choice Neighborhood Initiative is actually a strong component of that is mixed income neighborhoods. And so it will be a requirement to build mixed income, so non-subsidized. And when we say non-subsidized, traditionally we mean units that are long-term housing tax credit, but they're not market rate. But with Choice Neighborhood, they actually have to be market rate. So you're talking about 100 to 120% AMI families living in the community. And it's a really equal mix with the Choice Neighborhood. So each development and phase has to have mixed income, low income, and market rate housing. Sorry.
But I think-
was specific about mixed use.
Oh, mixed use. Yeah, so we do have.
Well, before you go, because I think there are people listening, and we want to be very clear that as Councilor Snook and even as Mr. Sells is communicating, we're not talking about replacing any of our residents at all.
Correct.
Like, we're going to ensure, and we're working diligently to ensure that everybody who's there now, if they want to, will be able to stay. When we say mixed use and even different ways in which we can utilize the sites, is solely for revenue generation, and it's not about moving or displacing anyone. We have to make that disclaimer because sometimes people cut things up and they only hear what they want to hear.
And we are looking at mixed use as well, commercial components that are going to be incorporated. And so when we invited James, we were looking at, we were talking about laundry markets, we were talking about business incubators, we were talking about daycares. And so there were a lot of different business opportunities thrown out there. And so mixed use would definitely be a component of this development. In fact, Choice Neighborhood requires business growth to be a part of it.
Was someone else about to say something? Okay. Sorry, but just a topic to raise is, I know we've talked about it some in the past, but if you look at CRHA's number of staff members compared to the number of units managed, it's substantially lower than other area affordable housing nonprofits. Obviously, this is a lot of work, a lot of future work. Could you talk about your assessment of where staffing levels are right now in terms of funded positions? How many staff positions do you think the agency would need to kind of be fully staffed? I'm talking about like to be funded, not existing funded vacancies, and
Okay.
versus where you're at now.
Yeah, we currently have exactly 50 employees. We just hit that number. And the projections, when we penciled out everything, to be fully staffed and be able to manage the projects we have going on, I think we're at 63 total staff members. That would be the need, and that's not any new strategic initiatives that we may have planned 5 years down the road after we have accomplished what we have in front of us now, but that's just to take care of what our current need is. But we've been doing it with far less since I've been there. I mean, the housing authority has grown in size. It was less than 35 employees when I got there in 2020. But we still have a lot more growth that's needed in order to provide the service that our residents deserve and the community deserves.
And you have funding for how many staff positions currently?
All 50 that we currently have.
And then, obviously, the city provides a substantial amount of funding for capital projects. Historically, has made some investment, but not on an ongoing basis in terms of the human staff side of the organization. What is your thinking and plan for how you fund those 13 additional positions? Are you planning that the city is a part of that mix? Are you looking in other areas?
So we're currently going through both SOP development, the strategic planning development, what that capital investment would need to be in order to complete those initiatives and goals that we've identified. And so we'll have a clearer number of what that looks like probably within the next 30 days. But at the pace we're currently going without city investment, the investment to get to that 63 employee number would not happen until all the redevelopments have occurred, because that's what has spurred the ability for us to hire more staff. So like at Crescent Halls, they only could afford a property manager and a maintenance person. Now they can afford security, 3 positions, and 2 maintenance staff members because they're producing more income now. And so the other projects have the same issues. The capital money that we get from HUD is very low. $600 per unit is not a lot when you're talking about covering all the utilities, electric, water, sewer, trash, and maintaining like the staff needed to maintain the property. It's barely enough to get by, and it has been a struggle. But we are going through this redevelopment process, and so there is light at the end of the tunnel, but that's a long tunnel.
Yeah, and as you know, I think the buildings, the capital projects get a lot of attention, but I think investing in employees, ensuring there's enough money for the wages and benefits to be competitive on the market, as well as there's just enough funded staff positions, is maybe the bedrock of long-term success. And just 2 more things. One, you didn't touch on, you have the Dogwood portfolio now, which is a very large portfolio. You've inherited maintenance problems, as well as there's a lot of opportunities for redevelopment down the road. Yes. What is kind of the timeline or game plan for how to approach those 2 things within the Dogwood portfolio?
So we have 2 different parallel approaches going at the same time there. We're looking at what work needs to happen in order to keep the unit sustainable and livable at the moment. But we're also strategically looking at the property or portfolio as a whole to identify what opportunities are available for redevelopment, to not only redevelop the site, but bring back more affordable units, and to hopefully use some of the Faircloth units as a mix for some of the traditional market rate developments that may occur on the sites during redevelopment. And so we're currently looking at 3 properties on Ridge Street and 1 on Harris, potentially as redevelopment opportunities as a first phase in Dogwood. But we don't have anything firm yet. I see you looking at me, Sam. Don't have anything firm yet, but those are projects that we're looking at. And we're not currently looking at them requiring city support because it will be a partnership with the public market, public and private partnership.
But timelines TBD for even planning.
Correct.
And the final thing, could you just talk a little bit about, CRHA is not a nonprofit. It is a quasi-governmental agency, which creates a different situation in terms of fundraising. CRHA is in the process of exploring creating a nonprofit to engage in fundraising through that more traditional mechanism. What is the timeline and plans for that?
So the board passed a resolution, I believe a year ago, authorizing us to look into a nonprofit. We're currently working to set that up, and we plan to come back to the board with more information on that nonprofit at a future work session. CRHA is a quasi-government agency. A lot of folks look at us as a nonprofit, and the nonprofits that look at us and the foundations, they say, well, you're a government agency, you don't need our money, you should go back to the federal government or local government to get your money. And so really it's a push that some folks here say, in the city say, hey, you should go there to get money, and those folks say, hey, you should go there to get money. So we really get stuck in between a rock and a hard place in some cases. I will say within the last few years, we've been really successful with getting foundations to donate to us and provide us with grants. But with the nonprofit, that will ease things a whole lot because we'll have the certification that a lot of firms and organizations are looking for.
And I would say if there was a timeline, with Dr. Goldblatt and Commissioner Wicks, they've been working hard on this. If we were to say probably the end of the year, for sure, is our goal in terms of having that C3 status up to date. And also Ms. Kathleen Glenn Matthews has been working diligently on it. So we'll get there, and this will be something in which we can also discuss when we have our next session/update, because this is going to be a semi-annual meeting, correct? Everybody slowly, yes.
Yeah.
There we go. There we go. So when we have our next update, we'll be able to provide that information.
Other questions, comments on the side?
I'm done.
I think Dr. Goldblatt has something that she wanted to add.
Yeah, so there's a few things, just we don't get a lot of opportunities. Are these like linked to Zoom or something? Is that why we have to talk into them? Anyway, we don't get a lot of opportunities to meet with you. And I think there's things that we hear in meetings during public comment that it's really important to flag for city councilors. One is about resident safety. I really think we need to think about safety as a crisis and as a citywide problem. There's a lot of violence in our neighborhoods. There's a lot of trauma, and I think that we tend to treat safety in a patchwork way, like try to apply this Band-Aid here or there, let's get this service. And just like the city has gone through this comprehensive rezoning process to think about affordable housing holistically, to think about how it will shape the city, I really think it's time to start thinking about safety in Charlottesville more holistically. And I say this because I don't have the answers. I do think there's excellent data that's really strong that says more affordable housing and more people housed is going to lead to greater public safety. But it's more complicated than that. And I think a lot of our residents, they need safety right now. And their needs are far beyond what CRHA alone can provide. And so starting to think as a city together about what we can be doing. And it's not, none of this is going to be an immediate fix, but things that we can start to say, like what is a multi-year plan around greater safety in public housing, but in general in Charlottesville look like, and how would we build that? So I think that's one thing to be really deliberate about. The other thing that we sometimes hear from residents in public comment is that there's some bureaucratic confusion around when they approach CRHA in need of housing, and they're told, you're not eligible for some of our programs, you have to get a city referral, and then how all of that works. So if there's any way to look through those bureaucratic procedures to make sure that people are not dropping through the cracks, because you have people who are in need of housing and they are eligible for housing, but because of the various regulations around that find themselves stuck, and are finding themselves in really dire situations. We heard about 2 such cases last night at our meeting. And so thinking about ways that we can try to make those processes as clear and transparent as possible, and to have as many mechanisms in place to make sure that we're not losing people because they don't understand where they're supposed to go, or they just think like, well, nobody followed up with me and now I don't know what to do.
Well, I'll chime in first. I think that for your second item that you mentioned, I think we have the players right here with Alex and John to make sure that we got the processes in place to make sure no one, drops through the grid on that. And second, the first one is the issue on safety. I would like to see some type of citywide plan, some type of approach. That's one of the, I know, at least for me personally, sometimes we get all of the emails, but I get a lot of concern about the safety and then how, so these things are definitely connected on that, because I think before we have do anything, residents have to feel safe before we can provide any type of services and things to them. They have to feel safe. And that, I feel like that's one of our, as counselors, #1 priority. So it is something that, just as within house, that we're working on every day. It's no easy answer because, we know when it gets warm, things can heat up. But anyway, so thank you for bringing that to attention. So, and also just want to thank all of you all for serving on the board. Your service, the hours that you put in is really important, and I should have thanked you all from the beginning. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
So, what are you hearing through the Resident Safety Committee and Resident Services Committee in terms of things residents would like from the city that aren't currently being provided?
So, one thing is something that Mr. Sales pointed out in his report, that there's a question of enforcement of the barment policy. So people who have gone through a CRHA process and are barred from properties, and there's there's very little ability to enforce that if that person shows up. So thinking about ways to partner with the city around that. I think also there's concern, I know we're revising our parking policy, but a lot of times people are worried about people parking up in public housing and then using that as a kind of hub to move through things. There's a lot of concern about drugs, so people are concerned about drugs. And then there's some really mundane issues like speeding. Speeding is something that our residents, especially those with children and grandchildren, talk to us about all the time, and that they want speed bumps and speed humps in public housing like in other places. They want people to have less direct access to go through, but they'll say as soon as staff are gone for the day, people are just ripping through public housing, and it's really a hazard for children. So I think those are their big ones that they're concerned about, and I think that there's a lot that CRHA is trying to do, but things like drugs, speeding, that stuff that I think we need to be thinking about as a city. I don't know, Bridget, if you want to add anything.
No, I don't know.
I think I would say to that point, these are citywide issues, as we're all aware. And I think maybe coming out of this meeting, just as we've committed, I think we are all committing to continue to work collaboratively to address the affordable housing issues. This is, as Dr. Goldblatt alluded to, is in fact a part of those same tentacles, if you will. So I would be open to, and I think I can speak for the board, I think we all would be open if there was a joint meeting, maybe a collaborative effort between us and other entities to having a discussion around safety. Obviously, it'll be a long-term kind of discussion, but if that was with CRHA and other organizations, Uhuru, Ready Kids, I don't know. There's a multitude of folks who are doing a lot of different work, the police department and so forth. I think we could maybe come to some kind of tangible solutions in which we can, again, collaboratively work. I think, if we were to look at that prior to the young folks going back to school in August, so if that was, late July or early August, to get the quote-unquote players in the room for a public safety meeting. I know there's models in other cities who are doing similar, but I think it would behoove us all, and then selfishly, from a housing authority perspective, it would help us in the immediate.
Yeah, so one thing I'll add too is that I don't know, Bridget, if you want to jump in.
I was just gonna say, so Dr. Goldblatt and I split the safety committee meetings. I don't have a microphone. I guess I need a microphone. So we split the coverage of the safety committee meetings, and speak on behalf of myself, like I'd be happy to join another committee or whatever to like bring what we hear in those meetings to collaborate to try to come up with some solutions. And I think we're talking about the more mundane, but I think what doesn't get raised in the safety committee meetings, but that I think we are all aware of across the community is that there's like some violence and some shooting issues, and that is not just a housing authority issue. I definitely don't know the answer to that, but I think, we can help and partner with that. I think would be good for the community as a whole, and I'm willing to invest additional time for that.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I'll add that we do sometimes hear, or that I've had residents talk to me about, and some people in the community who have come to safety committee meetings, is it's just worth being aware that there's a lot of trauma in the public housing and low-income housing communities that we serve. And that comes up a lot, that like people who have had trauma either from bad social services in the past, so things around foster care or violence, or displacement, and then some of the big deal things like August 2017, people who were kids in that moment are still really reeling from the trauma of what happened. We're seeing a lot of trauma, and I think that there's a real recognition that there's not a lot of easily affordable and accessible mental health options, especially amongst people who have experience working with low-income residents and people of color. And so there's a real call to say, can we start to think about virtual counseling options with people who can provide care and understand the kinds of issues that we're dealing with, because I think people often feel like they don't know where to go when they're feeling a lot of these things. And so thinking about what resources exist within the city and potentially other ones that we could tap now that so many people are willing to do virtual counseling, and to think about what models there are. I know that Mr. Sales had been looking into some of this at one point because it was really pretty acute during COVID. People were feeling so much trauma, so much loneliness, and I don't know if we ever arrived at a really solid solution, but I know we were working with Region 10 for a while to come up with more counseling services just for public housing.
Yeah, that fell apart because there really wasn't enough resources financially, and Region 10 didn't have the capacity to actually provide us with that service, and so it fell apart, but there's definitely a need, and the conversation kicked off when we had a lot of violence, a lot of gun violence a couple years ago, and now folks are talking about it again. So it is an investment that we would like to make, but the resources were not there for CRHA to make that investment. And so we reached out to Region 10, but they do not have the capacity for something like that at the moment.
I will make the argument that in some ways we probably collectively are going to have to address gun violence as a public crisis in some regard. Yeah. I know for some that may seem as if it's extreme, but for others it definitely feels like it's something that's needed in the immediate. It's really a public safety issue, and again, it's a crisis in many regards. So we're not going to solve all of this, quote unquote, tonight, but I do think that it's something I'm looking forward to us having more intentional conversations about moving forward. And I think not only Commissioner Wicks, but all of the commissioners, we are here to serve and be of assistance in any capacity, with also the recognition that all of the shootings aren't solely happening at the housing authority or on our properties. As we all know, I just think it's important for us to notate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the city had a gun violence working group, and if my memory's correct, I think some of the things they referenced in terms of research of what works was, on the police side, increased visibility of officers where crime is occurring, community policing, but then increased street lighting, improvements to even just physical infrastructure, trees, mental health care, all that. So I know there's just a lot of unimplemented things, increased job internship programs over the summer. But anyway, I just reference that because that's it's not the final, complete look, but there was a recent city cross-department, including social services, look at policies that's, perhaps a place to start. The final thing on this is, in written reports you've referenced, John, you've heard from residents that there was concerns that partnership with the police department perhaps wasn't as strong as some residents would like. And I know that's just one component of a solution, but it's still an important one. I don't want to speak for anybody, but I've heard in the past that the chief and the department, I think, are open to any kind of partnerships that from residents are desired. Are there specific things that aren't happening that you're hearing from residents they'd like to see?
Yeah, so the residents that I'm hearing from want a relationship with the police department. They want to see a larger presence, but they want to see a presence where there's actually community policing happening, where they're getting out their vehicles, talking with residents, building relationships, attending meetings to let residents know what's going on in their neighborhood, and hearing from residents about their concerns. That's what the community would like to see from the police department. And so Chief Gotches, I've spoken with him, and we're working to get more meetings together and to build on our barment process with the assistance of Joe Platania to make sure it's something that he can actually defend. But we are working to build that relationship, and the residents are asking for it. They're asking for that relation to get built more than any other relationship, because they're hearing and they're seeing the issues that are in the community. In their community.
If I can add to that, one of the things that we worked on really hard in the safety committee meetings in 2020 and I think through like 2022 is residents wanted an MOU with the police department. So they said, like, we want police to come in, but we want to be treated with respect, and we want to be able to have some control over what happens within our communities. And that was a no-go with the police department at the time. I have a document I'm happy to send people of the things that residents said they wanted to see in an MOU. But at the time that we were told, like, no way, the police department is not going to have an MOU with CRHA because they're not going to have different agreements with different communities. And so I don't know if residents feel differently about that now, if some of that has shifted, but I'm happy to pass along what residents said they wanted to get some understanding from the police department of what they were going to be seeing from them.
I would say definitely. In which year was that?
I'll have to look at my computer and see what the timestamp is. I think that we finished it in 2022.
Yeah, I think it was beginning in 2022. It was with the previous administration, with the police department.
It wasn't under Chief Cox, so yeah, maybe this is a conversation we can revisit. So I think,
Can I ask about one other thing? We got a couple of emails this weekend talking about the broader issue of CRHA and the Buck Squad. And I'm not here to be carrying the Buck Squad's water or anything, but we had a lot of questions at budget time about they wanted a whole lot of money to be able to do things, frankly, some of them in CRHA properties at a time when they didn't have an agreement with you all. And I see from the recent emails that there may be some progress towards getting a little bit of discussion going there. I hope that I don't tout them as being the answer, but they can be a part of the solution. If there's a way that you all can figure things out so that people are willing to work with the Buck Squad, I think that that's something that might benefit everybody.
So we have a meeting scheduled with them in August, and they'll give a chance to tell the residents what they would like to present and offer to the residents. But I will say the concerns that we've heard from residents the last 3 to 4 years are outweigh, in my opinion, the concern.
well, we have a clear process. Thank you, Mr. Sells. And just to be clear, we have a process for any outside entity or group to be a part of or participate with CRHA or partner with CRHA, specifically groups that fall under the auspice of Buck Squad, like the Buck Squad. They have to be approved by our Resident Services Committee, and our Resident Services Committee has discussed them in months prior. We have found through our process that we'll have them added to our agenda for the Resident Services Committee in August. The July agenda is already set. They will have the opportunity to present to the Resident Service Committee, and per HUD guidelines, entities such as Buck Squad have to be approved by the Resident Services Committee first. I think that's what Mr. Sells was alluding to. They will be able to present there at that time, and then after which, the residents will decide how this moves forward, which we communicated with them this weekend on the emails that Councilor Snook was referencing, and at that point is when we'll be able to decide how we move forward. Right, Mr. Sells? So I think that concludes our meeting, unless you all have anything else you'd like to add?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. I think on behalf of the Housing Authority, one, we want to thank our staff who worked very diligently for showing up.
Yeah.
Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Keena.
Ms. Thomas? Oh, my apologies. Well, I'm sorry, Mayor Snook,
Yeah.
Mayor Wade, it's from me.
Are there anyone from the public that would like to speak?
Here, Emily, do you want mine?
My name is Emily Dreyfus, and I'm an organizer with the Legal Aid Justice Center. I recently left the position of interim executive director with FAR, and this is the night that worked for the officers and the new executive director, Latricia Giles, to meet. So they're sorry that they aren't in the room. But I will definitely share information, and I'm sure they'll watch the recording. So FAR is super grateful to be a partner in this work, and when you hear it all condensed into one evening, it's like shocking how much has been accomplished. So I appreciate everyone that's contributed. Everyone in this room has done something, and it has made a big difference for residents. One of the things that has worked super well is the incentives that have been provided for resident planners. It's a great example of paying people a reasonable amount to be at the table and share their lived experience that has just made this process work so much better. I would echo all the concerns that have been raised, especially around gun violence and safety issues, and the difference between community policing done right and policing that makes people feel overly watched, under surveillance all the time, and harassed. And we've had that extreme happen in public housing in years past. We don't want to see that come back, but we definitely, I think, need to see an increased police presence, and an effective one that helps address the problems and prevent the problems. The other piece of safety issue that Dr. Goldblatt mentioned, like sort of the Band-Aid approach that sometimes happens, is the cultural clashes, because what happened in the high school happens in our neighborhoods. And we have much more diversity than we ever had in the past, and there are conflicts between kids. And I think that there needs to be a sustained city effort to address those issues and try to bridge the gaps and help make the conflicts decrease and increase tolerance. And then the other thing I just wanted to touch on is choice neighborhoods. The Residents' Bill of Rights and FAR's positive vision for redevelopment emphasized increasing density for the sake of increasing deeply affordable housing. I think FAR's positive vision named 40% as a goal. So the idea of using choice neighborhoods as a funder means that market rate would be half of the housing, which is going to significantly decrease the quality of life for people living in West Haven. So I think that's something that has to be weighed out really carefully. At this point, I believe FAR does not support that and does not want to see that happen. And I really encourage you to look at the fact that density decreases quality of life in some aspects, and to weigh that carefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Anyone else like to speak?
Could I ask a question? So I know we talked about this piece with safety and the police being involved and so on, and some efforts before school starts. Was there an actual like follow-up or like?
Call to action.
Yeah, I mean, was there a thought about what might be a next step?
So we've already had conversations that have begun. FAR's new executive director did reach out and has requested a meeting with residents, and I'm working with Ms. Giles as well as the chief to make that possible. Based on what I've heard tonight, it feels like that'll be a step one to additional conversation that we need to have. We're having other conversations. We're meeting with the Buck Squad this week as well. And I've already reached out to Uhuru and have to just get that coordinated. So the effort is already underway. I think part of the work that we have to do is, one, get all the right people in the room. And I'm going to be controversial and say, and get everybody on the same page and make sure that everyone is being honest about everything so that we can then work through those things. Because I think that keeps getting in the way, honestly, as to why we haven't been able to figure out some of this stuff.
Yeah. I guess the other point I would like to make just in closing is I think the piece that Councilor Payne has mentioned a number of times about in the budget every year, we can do more, and we want to do more in terms of funding capital efforts, and I'm not sure exactly how this works in terms of a fundamental agency or whatever the term is that we're using, but I think we really need to think going forward about if we can, should we, I think both of the answers to both those questions is yes, do more to support maybe not subsidizing their funding per se for their operations, but thoughtfully think about ways that we can sort of be a force multiplier for their staffing, given the amount of work that they have going on. So next budget season, that'd be something I'd be interested in, and I would be, open to funding something like that. I don't know exactly how that would look. I know that you would have lots of great ideas about how that might be structured, Mr. City Manager, but I'm just wanting to sort of echo what Michael said, that we come up against this every year, and I think it's something that, I don't know how y'all mentioned how you did your funding for your folks, and you are kind of this weird sort of public agency, but you're also having to act like a private developer, frankly, and I'm not sure how we can help them with that operational side of things, but if you've got suggestions, maybe we could talk about it later, Sam. Yeah.
Yep. Noted as well for follow-up.
Okay, no other action, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.